How 13 Wild West historical figures perished in reality. The Wild West, with its gunfights, cowboys, and gunslingers, is a major component of American legend. Legends have been made of the exploits of sheriffs and outlaws in the Old West, and many of their demises have also been met with fantastical circumstances. Other renowned people demises were unexpectedly unremarkable and commonplace, yet they were a part of the Wild West's actual history. They were merely susceptible to the difficulties brought on by years spent residing in the Old West. The dead man's hand was held by Wild Bill Hickok when he was shot from behind. After his account of shooting 3 men who were attempting to kill him was published in a magazine, Wild Bill Hickok gained notoriety. Following accidentally killing his constable in a shootout, Wild Bill quit practicing his gunplay following a spate of gunfights. Young gunslinger Jack McCall entered the tavern with his back to the door and shot Wild Bill in the back of the head. All of the other rounds he tried to fire at them missed. Wild Bill was holding a pair of aces and eights when he passed away, and this hand came to be known as the dead man's hand. Belle Starr was killed in an ambush, and her killer was never found. Belle Starr was probably more of a criminal's associate than a seasoned offender. She was found guilty of horse theft and sentenced to 9 months in prison. She surrounded herself with criminals and dubious individuals, including 2 husbands who were killed in gunfights. Her years of socializing with criminals eventually caught up with her. Starr was shot twice in the back one day while she was traveling home. Her murderer was never captured. Her death was the subject of rumors, although, according to at least one of the tales, her own son Ed was involved. Former members of Jesse James' gang shot him in the back. Thomas Crittenden, the governor of Missouri, made it his personal vendetta to apprehend Jesse James since he was such a skilled burglar. Jesse and his brother Frank were staying under the radar following a botched bank robbery. But as Frank began to lead a more conventional lifestyle, he left Jesse's gang, requiring Jesse to recruit new members who shared Frank's lack of devotion. Here comes Bob Ford, who had just joined Jesse with his brother Charlie. Bob persuaded his brother to plan an assassination of Jesse James after learning of Crittenden's new $10,000 reward for his capture. The Ford brothers and Crittenden came to an arrangement. A few months later, Jesse was moving into one of his homes when the Ford brothers arrived. Jesse took off his coat and his weapons after growing too overheated. Jesse was inside dusting a picture when Bob shot him in the back of the head. Jesse was standing on a chair. It's possible that Butch Cassidy killed himself before shooting the Sundance Kid. A teenage Paul Newman and Robert Redford may come to mind when thinking about the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The Wild Bunch, as Cassidy's crew was called, made an average take of $35,000 every theft. And because to Cassidy's meticulous planning before each crime, they were virtually impossible to apprehend. Butch and the Sundance Kid, after years of wrongdoing, made the decision to give it all up and leave for South America to begin a new life. They apparently took a job in Bolivia after maintaining a low profile. The two were holed up in a home when the Bolivian cavalry encircled them. A firefight ensued and one of the guys was wounded. Reportedly the Sundance Kid. The guys were found dead that night after hearing 2 gunshots, Sundance Kid with a bullet wound between his eyes, and Cassidy with a self-inflicted wound to his temple. However, whether or not these men were the fabled team has been highly contested. For many years later, many others claim to have seen Cassidy. A lot of people are familiar with Davy Crockett, often known as the King of the Wild Frontier. But if you ask people what he's genuinely well known for, they all have a variety of responses. He was a U.S. politician, a storyteller, and a frontiersman. However, he is best remembered for his valiant final stand at the Battle of the Alamo in 1836, where he lost his life. It's widely contested how he breathed his final breath. According to the conventional narrative, Crockett and 200 other men resisted thousands of Mexican soldiers for 13 days before succumbing to their numbers. Crockett was killed while defending the Alamo in this decisive battle. Crockett, according to some historians, was one of 6 troops who reportedly surrendered in exchange for their lives, but the enemy side disregarded the deal and executed them all. Billy the youngster was actually only a youngster. He may have killed 17 people by the time he was 18 years old, and he was still at large. A few years later, Billy was finally apprehended by Sheriff Pat Garrett, who then brought him to trial where he was found guilty and given the death penalty. But Billy managed to escape just before his execution in 1881, killing 2 guards in the process. Garrett spent 3 months looking for Billy before receiving a hint concerning his whereabouts. At the Maxwell Ranch in New Mexico, Garrett crept into his shadowy bedroom and waited until Billy returned. Garrett shot Billy when he entered the space, killing him. Her years of socializing with criminals eventually caught up with her. Starr was shot twice in the back one day while she was traveling home. Her murderer was never captured. Her death was the subject of rumors, although, according to at least one of the tales, her own son Ed was involved. Buffalo Bill Cody's body sat around for 6 months before it was buried. Buffalo Bill Cody became a household name in the late 1800s, thanks to his famous Buffalo Bill's Wild West traveling show. Cody died from kidney failure while visiting his sister in Denver on January 10, 1917. The date is important because in Cody's most up-to-date will, he requested burial atop Lookout Mountain in Colorado, which had remarkable views. But the road up the mountain was impassable in January due to snow. Cody's body was preserved in cold storage for 6 months per his last wish, which necessitated embalming it 6 times. Many individuals fought during this time for him to be buried in Cody, Wyoming, the town he created and the location of his last resting place, specified in an earlier bequest. In the end, it is generally acknowledged that Cody was buried on Lookout Mountain, but rumors contend that his remains was removed and transported to Wyoming. When Annie Oakley passed away from anemia, her husband was probably so distraught that he died. When Annie Oakley established herself as a great markswoman and spent years touring with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, she became a hero for young girls all around the world 18 days later. But before she was the shooting icon Annie Oakley, she was 16-year-old Annie Mosey, or Annie Moses, depending on who you ask, a gifted shooter. The local hotel owner organized a trap shooting competition with professional exhibition shooter Frank Butler while she was there to see her sister. The local hotel owner organized a trap shooting competition with professional exhibition shooter Frank Butler while she was there to see her sister. Frank fell head over heels and they soon were married. They spent nearly 50 years together when Oakley became ill and passed away from anemia. Butler's cause of death is unknown. However, considering that he passed away just 18 days after Oakley, it is likely that he had a broken heart. They were interred in Oakley's family grave together. Henry Plummer may have acted illegally on both sides and received a death sentence for it. Depending on who you ask, Henry Plummer was either a law-abiding sheriff who was murdered without provocation or a felon who abused his position of authority and committed numerous crimes. Few details are known about Plummer. He did murder a number of people, albeit one could claim that he acted in self-defense. A mob forced him to the gallows and hanged him, killing him just a year after he was elected sheriff in 1864. Alcoholism and inflamed bowels killed the catastrophe Jane. John Calamity Jane's name is a dead giveaway for her manner of life. She occasionally worked for the Pony Express while dressed as a man, and she may have also engaged in prostitution to make ends meet. Jane, a performer in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, rose to fame for her accuracy while mounted on a horse. With her rising fame came a reputation for reveling in excessive drinking. The whiskey eventually caught up with her, and she battled serious alcoholism for years before she passed away at age 51. Legend has it that Wild Bill Hickok, a friend and former drinking companion, was buried close to her in order to reunite them in eternity. According to legend, Hickok showed little interest in Jane, therefore her burial served as one last practical joke on behalf of the renowned marksman. One of Hollywood's biggest movie cowboys wept at Wyatt Earp's funeral. Lawman Wyatt Earp wasn't a household name in the 1800s. He didn't achieve wide fame until after his demise, when a biography about his wild adventures, including the shootout at the OK Corral, was published. Earp moved to Los Angeles in his later years when his gunfighting days in the Wild West were over. He served as an unpaid consultant for the developing Western film genre, becoming good friends with actors like Tom Mix and William Hart. Hart and Mix served as the pallbearers during Earp's funeral in 1929. Mix is said to have sobbed during the service. Earp got so close to these performers. John Henry Doc Holliday was a dentist by trade in Texas, but his love of cards led him in a different direction. Holliday engaged in his fair share of shootouts, card games, and heavy drinking while growing close to Wild West legends like Wyatt Earp. The latter made him sicker and sicker by aggravating his pre-existing TB. Finally, Holliday admitted himself to a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, to receive treatment for his deteriorating tuberculosis. He passed away there in 1887 at the age of 36. Doc Holliday passed away at age 36 from tuberculosis. Bat Masterson suffered a heart attack at his desk after starting as a journalist. Bat Masterson spent the first half of his life as a gunman before transitioning into a sheriff after meeting Wyatt Earp. Masterson was persuaded by Earp that he would make an excellent choice to assist in taming the disorder in Dodge City, Kansas. Masterson concurred because his two brothers were already working in law enforcement close to Dodge City. During his tenure as sheriff, he experienced both joy and sorrow, including watching his brother, Ed, be shot and died. Masterson intended to settle down in the East with his wife when he was 49 because he had grown weary of the chaos in the West. They relocated to New York, where Masterson spent a few years working as a newspaper journalist and U.S. Marshal. Masterson passed away in 1921 after suffering a heart attack at his newspaper desk.